Well, what if you could have a personal lawyer available to you each and every week? You can, because that's what we're about to do right now. Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us each and every Thursday morning. She brings her legal expertise by providing some general advice on the latest of hot topics. She has experience that spans more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law. She also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation. With us once again. Morning to you, Despina.
Morning, Wayne. Morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Despina. Welcome back to the show. We're kicking off this morning. It is heading headlines across the nation. But this morning we're talking about the truth about Aussies and gambling. It seems like there is this unhealthy relationship. And Despina, there was a public inquiry and you have some of the statistics there. And we would love, just to kick off while you're listening, guys, if you have something to say, any comments or queries or your own opinions about gambling, or if you've experienced it yourself, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to the breakfast page. But Despina, talk us through what are these statistics that kind of shocks you?
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. And I do want to emphasize that I think over the years, gambling, certainly recently, and the addiction to gambling, particularly online gambling, has hit the headlines. And I think the whole culture behind it as well with Australia has really progressed. And there's a sort of a people are tainted, when you potentially have an addiction to gambling and they don't talk about it. So very much I want to reach out to the community out there and say, look, if you have comments about what we're going to talk about today, we really should send it through to the station or to myself, because the online gambling and gambling in this country is going to move. It's shifting because of what we've seen in the community, because of what they're saying now, where there's evidence to support what's been listed in this report, which I'll get to in a minute, that this is a real public health issue. It's a real public health issue. And it is an addiction. It is an addiction and an affliction, unfortunately. And in Australia, Australians spend the most in the world per capita on legal forms of gambling, and losing 25 billion each year.
Yeah, an amazing, shocking statistic, isn't it?
It's really shocking. So this inquiry, let's talk about it a bit. So in September last year, the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Social Policy and Legal Affairs was formed to conduct an inquiry. Okay, and the inquiry was into the harm caused by online gambling advertising. So if you're sitting there and initially your ears are pricking up going, oh, yes, that's right. When you watch TV or when you watch Netflix or whatever your medium that you're using to watch, shows these days, and you see these advertisements pop up about gambling. And I've said to myself, geez, it's on the increase. When I watch something, why am I watching so many gambling advertisements? And it has been on the rise, particularly during the pandemic. So they did this inquiry and it followed the review of 161 submissions, 26 exhibits, and 13 public hearings. Right, so it's quite substantial. And the committee finally handed down its report on the 28th of June recently, so only a few weeks ago. And the report is 197 pages. So it is substantial. And in that report, and I have not read the entire report, I have not had time to do that, but I have read the introduction and the foreword, and I can see just from reading the first few pages, you can see the footnotes of where all the evidence has come from a variety of bodies around Australia, including the Australian Medical Association and other medical types of associations as well, like psychiatrists and psychologists who have provided their own information into this inquiry. So what we're going to find as a result of this inquiry, I believe, and what's indicative in this report, is that the gambling in this country is going to change in terms of advertising, all right, over a period of the next 3 years. So as a result of this report that's now been issued following their inquiry, there are a number of recommendations, and there's going to be certain phases kick in over the next 3 years. And this is what they're wanting to do. And the recommendations, as they suggested, is going to be phased over, say, 4 phases, as I said, as follows. So let's talk about what they're recommending, and we might get into some statistics about it. So phase 1 is prohibiting inducements in social media and online platforms and ads during school drop-off and pickup. Right, so I didn't even know that existed. There you go. So I don't do school pick up and drop off anymore. It's long gone. But that's phase one, right? Stamping that out. Phase two, banning all online gambling advertising and commentary on odds during and an hour either side of a sports broadcast. Yeah. So you might have noticed.
During the sports broadcast?
It says during and an hour either side of a sports broadcast. Yeah.
Either side.
You might have seen this increase of an association between sports and online gambling. And it's what the report is saying, look, it's really wrong to mix the two together. I mean, you've got the young community looking at sports and they immediately think online gambling because of how the two have associated together recently.
And you'll notice as well, even on uniforms, like the kids might not even realize that while the guys are running and they're watching, you know, them in their team jersey, which kids love, they look up to these people. They do usually have branding of some sort of sports betting company.
So part of the phase two is banning that as well, banning all of that on uniforms and in stadiums. So that's a big one. So then we move to phase three is banning broadcast ads between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. So that's basically your whole day. And then you got phase four, prohibiting all online gambling advertising and sponsorship within 3 years. So basically, they're going to be moving to a complete ban. Now, there's a couple of exceptions they've issued here, like dedicated racing channels, greyhounds and horses, etc. But they're really wanting to stamp this out. And I liken this to what's happened over decades with smoking. So if you recall, smoking over the years was, well, everyone was smoking. Well, not everyone, but a large proportion of the population was smoking. It was considered a social habit. It was considered acceptable. And the cigarette packets were all wrapped nicely in colourful paper and all this jazz. And then over the years, they transitioned to changing the advertising, making it sort of ugly advertising, giving, you know, much more warnings to people like this is a health hazard. And then now, of course, smoking is prohibited in indoors and certain outdoor areas.
And when you go to the shops, it's actually behind cupboard doors. Like they actually close the door. You can't even see them anymore.
Exactly right. So at the moment, when you think of online gambling, what's in the promo? And the only words really used is gamble responsibly. And you sort of say to yourself, well, what does that even mean? How do you gamble responsibly when there's evidence to show, as this report says, that gambling is very much and can be a real addiction?
Yeah, and a risk. And I think you mentioned off-air, Despina, as well, which is quite interesting, even education. So we're talking about kids and what the kids are seeing on TV and the way it's marketed. They're also proposing changing maybe education in schools about gambling.
I think you have to target it on a global effort, don't you? And target it at all fronts. So you've seen in video games that they've got social casinos. That's very much a part of what kids get exposed to in video games. They've got to provide better education in the schooling systems, because this report definitely showed that the youth in our country has been hit and targeted with online gambling. And that's really come about, I think, if I can say, and accelerated with mobile phones and mobile apps, you know, TAB apps and all sorts of other apps where you can just simply, with a press of a button, go and gamble. And the online gambling really increased. I think it almost doubled, as this report showed, during the pandemic. So everyone's sitting around at home twiddling their thumbs. Oh, okay, well, let's just go and, you know, do some gambling online. And, you know, it's harmless. It's no big deal. It's a bit of fun, you know, because that's how they advertised it. You know, they likened it with sports. Yeah, we've got a big sport culture in Australia. So let's go and advertise it before, during and after sports. You know, so they really were targeting the youth. And I think that was wrong, if I can say. And this report did talk about real evidence about how it changes and how it can become an addiction. And if I can quote here, it's got, for example, they found harmful gambling occurs in a spectrum of severity. They can progress to the behavioural addiction of gambling disorder. Repeated gambling can cause fundamental changes to the brain's reward, prioritization and stress systems, which are similar to those observed in addiction to psychoactive substances. I mean, that's just huge, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that is obviously the whole reason why we just wanted to discuss it and talk about it so heavily, because I think even Wayne said off air, gamble responsibly. Like, you got to have this before you gamble, you have to understand that this is your choice. And I think it's hard for people that aren't addicted to understand how serious it could actually become, because even off air, we're talking suicide, like people end up in debt and selling their homes, losing their families. Like it's now getting to a point where it is health-wise so bad across the nation. It's not just about, oh, Joe Blow doesn't care anymore. It's actually getting quite serious health-wise.
I think the social responsibility is got to shift back to the people who provide these platforms. And don't be mistaken, definitely the addiction is also to walking to a casino as well. It's not just online gambling, but the online gambling, I think, has accelerated what we've seen in this country with the addiction, particularly with the youth who don't have the money. I mean, who does have the money to gamble? Really, where it gets to the point where you lose your home, you're bankrupt, you go to jail. And there are real stories in this report. The human cost of online gambling in Australia, I mean, that's a heading in the report, which is very real. So look, Australia, as it's shown, has the highest gambling losses of any country in the world. We've got real evidence now obtained that it is an addiction. It is not just about, well, you go and be socially responsible and, you have the choice. You make the choice to walk into a casino. Well, yes, but do you have the choice to walk back out? When it's an addiction, how do you make that choice when it changes your brain patterns and your thinking and your focus and you can't get out of there? So people need to think about that. It's a major public health issue. It's now been identified. It's causing harm to the everyday Australians in this country, and to the people they love and to the communities. So now they're actually going to do something about it. I think it's a great idea, personally, over the next few years to try and, change it with these phases that they want to introduce. Now, as to whether that happens and how long it takes, let's just see how this country progresses. But I think this is the very real first step to a massive shift that I think we need to see.
Yeah, definitely. And this public inquiry is accessible to view online for the public?
It is. So if you just Google the words, you win some, you lose more, okay, which is the title of the report, actually.
Catchy.
Yeah, you win some, you lose more. If you Google that, it'll come up on your page and you can click on the report as a PDF and you can read the entire report if you want. But if you read just the first 2 or 3 pages, you'll be gobsmacked with the information that's provided there.
Yeah, it's shocking. So if you also want to get in touch, if you have an opinion on the subject, online gambling, or in the casinos, if you have any experience yourself and want to get involved, you can head to Breakfast Radio 97 or Priala Legal on Facebook. Now, coming up next, when you're buying a home, how many times can you inspect the property before settling? That's coming up in just a moment on Talking Law.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.